Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real, where we talk about things that matter with people who matter. And today I think this is the third episode of season 7 of this podcast. And if you are watching on Facebook, this is where I do the recordings so that I don't feel like I'm just talking into a void, even though it's just me I'm talking to here. Sometimes people join, and I love it when people add comments or questions as we're going live. And today I want to talk about this term that Stephen Colbert coined back in 2005, and the word is truthiness. And if you see in the description here, I give his definition, at least from Wikipedia. I looked it up on Wikipedia, and truthiness was a term that he coined during his satire show, which was in 2005. And I wonder about that term these days. It's been kind of shifted to be called fake news in some spaces. And truthiness is something that I'll just give you the definition here. It's the belief or assertion that a particular statement is true based on the intuition or perceptions of some individual or individuals without regard to evidence, logic, intellectual examination, or facts. Truthiness can range from ignorant assertions of falsehoods to deliberate duplicity or propaganda intended to sway opinions. And I wonder today, however many years later, whether that's become something that people expect in their worlds these days. I was awakened to this concept this week when I was watching some social media posts, which, by the way, probably not a great idea to watch social media posts, although, you know, I think it can be used for good. Anything can be used for good or for evil. And I like to use social media for what I consider to be good reasons. And it doesn't always end up that way in some people's worlds, because what I've been watching lately, maybe what has been causing me to pay more attention lately, is the negative tone and the feeling of some of the comments to posts. And I find it interesting that when people have a Facebook page or they have a platform somewhere and they post something that they think is important to them or something they agree with or believe in, how many people will come on and not ask a question, not look for more information, not look for clarification, but will just throw a bomb at it. And I use that term because it comes from Loretta Ross's work, Calling in the Calling Out Culture. She says we call out people all the time so that we can be right. Not so that we can learn, but so we can be right. And she calls those gotcha bombs. And people are so ready and willing to throw gotcha bombs at people, posters, that I find that really fascinating. So a friend of mine who I know in person posted something about an issue that was important to her, and she worded it in a way that left a little tiny bit of ambiguity. It wasn't um, it was her assertion. And the words she used caused a person in the comments to question the way she had said it. And she said something like, this belief is a fantasy. She didn't say it's true. She didn't say, I can't remember exactly how she said it. I shouldn't even bring it up in detail without having all the facts in front of me. That's truthiness, right? That's the problem I'm trying to address today. Her point was made about something, and she maybe used one word that was questionable, whether it was a true statement or whether it was just a fantasy or an illusion. And the poster came back and said, so is it a truth or is it an illusion? And he missed the point of the whole subject she was trying to address because he was stuck on that one word. And then he came back and said, so is it true or an illusion? Because he wanted to catch her at saying that she had said it was an illusion, not a fact, or whatever the word was. And all these people came on and in her defense, because they know her or because they agree with her, and people came on in defense of him because they agreed with the way he was addressing this. What he really wanted, I think, was her to admit that she could have worded it differently. It wasn't the topic at all. It was just the way she had worded it, at least in my observation. And so, what I wonder about in posts, like comments, we're only getting 7% of the total message because the words are only 7% of the total message if you look at communication theory. 55% is what it looks like, which is why I really appreciate these kinds of videos so that you can see nuance, you can see body language, you can see eye contact as well as you can in a video. That adds 55% to the message. People will believe what they see way more than they'll believe what the words say when the message is nuanced, let's say. 38% is the rate, the speed, the pitch of your voice. So that's the vocal element to it. And you don't get that from the words. If you do the math, it's 55%, 38%, 7%. And so what we're doing is interpreting someone else's words through our own filters. And then we're throwing that on someone else's intention. And that's the challenge. Communication is so difficult anyway. And then we throw this on top of it. And we make our judgments based on our interpretation of someone else's nuance. And we've lost that ability, that talent, that skill by looking only to prove what we already believe. And I think that's what Loretta Ross meant when she called it a gotcha bomb. I am so on point with her. It's a TED Talk. You can go look at it. Calling in the calling out culture. There's a different way to invite people into conversations or to engage people, however you want to use that nuanced word. You can call people out. You can call them in. You can call on them, or you can call it off. And I love the way she set that up, because at some point there comes a time when it's just walk away, people, just walk away. You don't need to throw a gotcha bomb at somebody so that you can prove that you're right about how they misspoke in one word or whatever it might be. And the challenge with all of this is when we are above the line. I'm going to go back to that. I use that all the time. Above the line is open, curious, committed to learning, according to the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership book. When we're conscious in our leadership or our awareness, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. And when we are below the line in unconsciousness, remember, it's unconscious. We are closed, defensive, and committed to being right unconsciously. This is just the way we're being without thinking. Without any consideration or pondering, we fall below the line into unconsciousness. Right? We're doing what we know to do, and it's unconscious because we'd rather be right than to learn. And here's the challenge with learning. I learned this from John Miller, QBQ, shout out to John Miller, who said learning equals change. If I haven't changed, I haven't learned. And if that is a true statement, then I would be willing to change my mind with new information. I would be beholden to do that if that's what learning is. Learning equals change. If I haven't changed, I haven't learned. So when I learn something, new information comes out. I gain more access to something I didn't have access to before, and I change my mind. If people are looking to throw gotcha bombs at people when they change their minds, then what are we doing? We want people to stay stuck in the first iteration they made about a topic. What does that say about us? That says that truthiness has taken over for actual truth. Truthiness, again, the belief or assertion that a particular statement is true based on the intuition or perceptions of some individual or individuals without regard to evidence, logic, intellectual examination, or facts. So facts don't matter, apparently, in the world of truthiness. And then we will never look for anything to change our minds if we live in the world of truthiness, which to me is below the line and unconscious, because I would prefer to be right over to be learning focused. And that, as an observer of that, as someone who's just observing that, that's frightening. What's the point of school? What's the point of learning anything? What's the point if we already know what we already know? If we are taught by people, probably then it would be families, right? It would be our parents. It would be people who are older. So if people who are older have accumulated their own wisdom and knowledge based on their own experience, then we don't need to have our own experiences. We just listen to people who are older and wiser. Wiser. In my mastermind group this morning, we were talking about the song that Mandy Patinkin sang after 9/11 at a church. And the song was a mashup of Children Will Listen and You've Got to Be Carefully Taught, those two songs. And it was chilling to think about those songs being written and performed years and years and years ago, about how you must be carefully taught to hate people and to see things differently because children will listen. And whether or not it's on purpose that we're teaching, again, going back to what's the point of learning, what's the point of anything, if we're not carefully teaching. Because children will learn anyway. They'll watch what we do. And not only children. People will watch what we do. 55% of the message is nonverbal. 55%. So you can say the words, but if your face says something different, people will believe your face over the words. So if this is true, and how would we know if it's true or if it's truthy, right? What's the way we discern? To me, I've said this before, but discernment is when I engage my head, my heart, and my gut. And I ask all three of those parts of me to come into the thing I'm discerning. You know, what does my head say? What does my heart say? What does my gut say? And have all three of them be part of that process. And when I do that with things I'm watching, like this post that I was referring to, something's off. There's just something that all three don't line up. And I watched how this one person who didn't, he was very persistent, I must give him that. He came back, and what he wanted to do was to have the original poster say, I misspoke. And maybe she did. I don't know. If she did, maybe there's something to that, where we could say every single word that ever comes out of my mouth must be carefully put into the world. Because heaven forbid I would make a mistake. If I made a mistake, it seems like it's someone's job to jump all over me and tell me how I am wrong. It's an identity thing, right? Where one person is the right person and one person is the wrong person. And there must be groups of people out there who are just looking for ways to prove that they are the right people. And that would then imply that there's a right way and a wrong way to do everything. And if you don't have the right way, then you are wrong. It's kind of like if you lose at a game, then you automatically, your identity becomes that of a loser. So nobody wants to lose because they don't want their identity to be that of a loser. And then all the nuance comes into this conversation, because then you start thinking, oh, I hadn't considered that before. I hadn't thought about it that way. And that's where learning enters, right? Where people can say, thank you for giving me something else to think about. And that's just been lost. It's been lost in so many ways over, I can't put my finger on when. I think we've been slowly drifting into this. And what I'm noticing when I feel, because I feel that I get pulled into that, I feel it in my body, I feel it in my jaw, my shoulders. I'm going to say a warning. That's a warning to me that I might be falling into unconsciousness, where I prefer then, in unconsciousness, to be closed, defensive, and committed to being right. My body will tell me when that happens. And in that state, I don't become my best self. I don't exercise my critical thinking skills. I'm just in defense mode. I want to make sure I can throw gotcha bombs back at people who are throwing them at me. And deflection then becomes a defense mechanism, and there's nothing that's exchanged that is new, nuanced, or shows our true intentions. And projection is another concept that's really interesting to me, because I'm wondering how often we project our deep-seated beliefs onto other people. Maybe some of our fears, we project our fears when we get so defensive. I'd love to have a conversation about this with someone who can stay in that open space, because it feels so often that when a person goes first in expressing some kind of curiosity or admits that they don't know everything about a topic, there's going to be someone out there throwing that gotcha bomb. Who gave you permission to come on a public forum and say something that maybe isn't all the way formulated? Or, we have to be so careful. And we end up being in beware mode, which is tight and tense. Think about the political people who are running for office coming up. Wow. We're pretty brutal as a society right now, with not allowing people to show up in their full, human selves, because we're so judgmental. Oh my gosh. Sometimes we one up each other for who is worse, right? I mean, it's such a weird competitive way of being. I want to prove that this person is wrong, and I will come back and poke and poke and poke and poke and poke. And then if I find out I was wrong in my poking, I'll just go away. I won't come back and say, I admit, oh my gosh, thank you so much for pointing that out. I was wrong. Thank you. No, you never, well, I shouldn't say never. You rarely see that happen. I've been aware of hyperbole recently. Hyperbole is a figure of speech that's been around forever, and it shows up in stories and writings and a lot of places, right? Short stories. Hyperbole is exaggeration on purpose. There were 1 million people at that event we had yesterday. That's hyperbole. It's not true. And we can prove it's not true. Yet hyperbole is a figure of speech that's been around for a long time. And I think hyperbole gets exaggerated on one hand, and it is squashed on the other hand. And it's just so interesting to watch this one-upmanship that I'm observing. It's what else could I call it? Hypocrisy. There's just a lot of interesting things to observe when you watch people talking. And one of the things that I've been guilty of myself is saying things like, I have nobody following me, because you see all these people on social media, which they'll say, we went viral and we have 8 million people and now all these people are watching, and I always, in my mind, and I might say it out loud, God, I don't have followers, nobody watches what I do. And it's such a lie. It's such a lie when I say that, because right now I have 2 viewers. Thank you, 2 viewers who are currently watching. I'm watching my live activity, and that's not nothing. That's not nothing. Thank you. And so I looked at my numbers. I looked up, this is the 7th season of this podcast. And I looked it up, and I have 62 subscribers on Substack. So that's not nobody. I've been writing every Monday on Substack for about a year now, and I have 62 people who have subscribed. I have 94 subscribers to my YouTube channel, which I think I probably have 3 or 4 years of my podcast uploaded there. I have 12,738 all-time downloads of my podcast, which is in I'll say 6 seasons, because we've just started the 7th. That's a lot. 12,738 people, downloads, have decided that there's something of value here. 176 this month and 11 this week. So that's not nothing. That's not nothing, Jodee. Stop saying you don't have any followers. Stop saying you're not making a difference in the world just because you can't see it. That's not true. I have 6.1 thousand followers on Facebook. Followers are not friends necessarily. And I realized that I have a whole lot of people who follow me who I have no idea who they are. And I learned that when I posted something about the Obama tower in Chicago that had these words around it that I noticed when I watched Colbert do the interview with Obama in that tower, and I saw words behind them or letters behind them that were backwards. And I got curious about that, and I thought, well, what is that? And I wanted to know more about what those backwards letters were. And so I looked it up, and I went to wherever I went to look for the facts, which, by the way, we could argue about that too, couldn't we? Somebody will say, oh, you went to, pick your source. And somebody will say, that's lie. That's a lie. That's not true. So there's always somebody. There will always be those out there below the line who are more committed to being right than to being in the conversation. And that's okay. I don't resonate with that beingness. So, whatever. Feel free. And even on that post, I posted what that quote said. And I don't have that in front of me right now, but it was a pretty innocuous quote, I thought. In fact, I will look it up while I'm talking here. And that quote was from a speech that Obama had made in 2015, I believe, at Selma during a celebration. And I seriously thought, oh, this is just something I'm posting because I think it's great. I didn't say you should believe it too. I don't think I said anything like that. And here it is. I'll come up with the quote itself. On the building, it says, it's kind of etched into one corner of the building. You are America, unconstrained by habit and convention, unencumbered by what is, ready to seize what ought to be. For everywhere in this country, there are first steps to be taken. There is new ground to cover. There are more bridges to be crossed. America is not the project of any one person. The single most powerful word in our democracy is the word we. We the people. We shall overcome. Yes, we can. That word is owned by no one. It belongs to everyone. Oh, what a glorious task we are given to continually try to improve this great nation of ours. I guess I didn't say everyone should believe this. I didn't mean to imply that when I posted it. I was inspired by it, and so I put it on my Facebook page, which, if you know me at all, you could get a sense of who I am. I'm pretty transparent out there. And it was fascinating to me how many people engaged with that post. People I don't have any idea who they are. I had 289 engagements. And I realized that that post, for some reason, woke up these followers that I have, these 6.1 thousand followers who aren't my friends, but who follow me. And boy, did they have something to say about that. Not all of them, but there were some who, one is a personal friend, I guess, acquaintance. I do know this person who just trashed it. And then that started a whole line of people having comments about that. And I thought, wow, this is fascinating to me to watch what happens when people have a microphone or have a stage or have a place to, what is it? Help me understand. Be right? I want to be right about how dumb this is and how bad this is. And I thought, how do you argue with a statement like that? And what I inferred from reading through some of those comments, somebody said it's not the comment, it's the commenter. And I went, oh, so there are people who hate Obama so much that they will diss anything Obama says. So I think about me. There are people who must hate me so much that they will diss anything I say. But here's the thing, they don't know me. If you hate me because you know me, that's one thing. I completely get that. I'm not for everybody. But without ever asking about me or what I believe or how I came to my conclusions, why is it so easy to throw people under buses that you will never see? I just don't get that. Is that what happens when we fall into this below the line unconscious behavior? When we realize that if learning equals change and I change my mind, then I've learned, and that's wrong? To me, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any logical sense. What am I missing here? And I believe that comments that might come up from this post or this episode, we don't want to talk about that. That's why I have very little engagement on my posts. My 62 people who follow me on Substack are probably people who agree with what I've said. And that's great. I love that. That's awesome. And if somebody disagreed with it and could respectfully say, here's what I think, wouldn't that be a great conversation to have? The word respectfully is in there. I just don't, I don't understand. I don't understand. Is it that these people who keep poking at me when I say something they don't like want me to understand something differently? Do they want me to say to them, you were right, I was wrong? And I would, if there were facts, if there were something, I would say, oh my gosh, thank you for enlightening me. I didn't know that. I was operating from my point of view. But when people post things like, um, the, I could get really political. When I post this about the Obama building because I was curious about it and because I wanted to know what those words were and I wanted to know I was just curious, right? And so I posted what I found in my research. And this other person says, and the left wing complains about Trump building a ballroom that all future presidents can use, paid for with private funds. Who paid for this? And I will say, I'm not going to say the male anatomy building. And that was a comment to this. What did that have to do with anything about what I posted? It had nothing. But then that started a whole other conversation. And I'm so curious. I'm just so curious about the anger and the frustration and the buildup over time that people must feel that they just don't have any way to get out. And it's just so interesting to me in a curious way. So those are the kinds of conversations I wish we could engage in more. I love having coffee with people or going out to a brewery and having a beer and really digging into some of these conversations, even if we don't see them from the same perspective. I had a conversation with a friend a while ago now, and we went out for coffee, and we see things completely differently. We come from completely different points of view, and yet there were elements of truth. I'm going to say truth, not truthiness, in what each of us was having a conversation about. I think, and it's not like I sell out if I agree with somebody who comes from a different perspective. I think there are people on either side that will say, "Oh, you're one of them." What does that mean? I'm this post that says we. I mean, it's about us. We power. What does it say? I'm going to reread it. The single most powerful word in our democracy is the word we. That word is owned by no one. It belongs to everyone. Oh, what a glorious task we are given to continually try to improve this great nation of ours. It almost gets me teary because I believe in my country. I love my country. I love where I live. It's so interesting. So all of that was started by this concept of truthiness. Where does truth show up in truthiness? Does it? Is there a place for truth in truthiness? Who owns truth? Who decides what's true? All of those are really important questions. And if we're not willing to wonder and ponder about them, and we will go with what we already believe, then what's the point of learning? Because learning equals change. So thanks for hanging in there with me. If you've listened at all, I appreciate it. These are the kinds of conversations I would love to have in person. The way Chris and we have these kinds of conversations in the Enlightened Leadership Lab on Mondays. We're throwing out concepts and then we're digging in and doing our best to understand these concepts. We're talking about turnings, historical turnings, and how the world is always shifting and changing. And we're talking about human evolutionary processes and how we grow our own understanding of things, because that's what nature does. Nature always moves toward creation. It's about always growing, always. If you look out the window today in Fargo, you'll see green trees where a couple weeks ago there were just buds. Nature is all about growth and expansion. And when we as humans try to keep stuck in the past and what we try to hold tightly to what already was, we're going against our nature. We're going against creativity. We're going against the creator of us, you know? Um, and I wonder about that. And I wonder why that is such a scary thing to consider. And yet it's so fun to collaborate with people who see things differently, who might see expansion. It's going back to Adam Grant's work about being a scientist and bringing a scientist mindset to things instead of a preacher or I'm trying to remember the other one's a politician. Um, and I can't remember the other one, but he talks about different ways of coming into a conversation. Um, you could look that up in his book Think Again, which was just amazing. So maybe we do just gather with our like-minded, like-hearted others, and maybe we just live in our own worlds of that instead of trying to convince anybody of anything else. Because people convinced against their will are of the same opinion still. So maybe, I don't know. I don't know the answer. Yet it would be fun to consider it. So this week, look for ways that you might be able to get real in your own world. Radical, which means getting back to the root of what makes you you. It's not crazy wild out there. That word's been kind of hijacked. It's getting back to the root of you. Energized, notice where your energy goes. Oh, authenticity, radical, energized, authentic, and learning focused. That's real. Thanks for hanging in there with me, and I'll talk to you again. See you, everybody.